Hey guys, if you're watching this video, then you should have already finished reading Everyday Use and wrote a summary. Everyday Use is by Alice Walker. She also wrote The Color Purple, one of my favorite movies. Anyway, so what we're going to do today is I'm going to walk you through how to complete the graphic organizer from Mama's Characterization. And then for the next two lessons, I want you to do D and Maggie on your own. And then if you submit it to me, I'll give you some feedback. Okay. So the first thing that we're going to look at when we're trying to figure out the characterizations of Mama is that we're going to look at what does she say and how does the character speak. You may have noticed that Mama doesn't say a whole bunch. So she doesn't talk a lot. She is extremely direct. And she definitely, you should have noticed that she had a country accent. She uses country slang. So we would put that in our first chart. Mama speaks in the slang of the country. She is direct and doesn't say much. The next thing we need to do is find evidence from the text. So it says note words, phrases in the text that relate to the trait. So now I'm going to look through and I'm going to see where I can prove that Mama speaks in slang. And if you go to paragraph 27, she says, "You know as well as me you was named after your Aunt Deesy." That is one example of Mama speaking with a country twang. You know as well as me. Oh, let's put that in quotations. You know as well as me, you was named. So if you see she has some grammar issues here. And then let's put what paragraph that's on so that we can come back to it later. Let's find another example. And as I would skim through the text, I would look for the words that Mama said. And so on paragraph 68, if we go to paragraph 68, when Mama says, "I reckon she would," can you get more country than that? All right. So now we have two examples of Mama speaking in a country slang. Now, why is that important? So I think that the first thing you can assume based on the way Mama speaks is that her upbringing is definitely during the South. And it also shows with her issues with grammar, it shows that she's not really educated. So we would write that in this box where it says explain how the trait relates to the theme. Mama's speech relates the story of her upbringing in the South. It also shows her struggles because she is uneducated. And what I did to help you guys out is I actually put the theme at the very top of the paper here in red. In the short story, Everyday Use, Alice Walker illustrates the idea that legacy is a connection with family, their struggles, and their stories. And that's what this text is about. The text is about how Mama and Dee and Maggie fit into this or bring about this legacy, and how, remember with Henrietta Lacks, her legacy is kind of like her sales. But here we're showing that a legacy could be just your connection with family. And as you do the characterizations, you'll get it more and more. Okay, so let's think about thoughts. If you notice, there's a couple of times that Mama starts wishing that she was something that Dee could be proud of. And so we're going to write that down. Mama shows how she wants to be educated and beautiful. Someone her daughter could be proud to call mom. But then towards the end, we start seeing a shift in Mama. And Mama's not really happy with the way that Dee is ashamed of her family, because Dee is obviously ashamed of her family. She also reveals how she doesn't like the way Dee is ashamed of her family. And so the first thing we have to do now is remember our second box. We find evidence of that. And so if you turn to paragraph 4, you'll see where she says she starts dreaming about what she wished she looked like to make Dee proud. I am the way my daughter would want me to be. 100 pounds lighter. My skin like an uncooked barley pancake. And that's paragraph 4. And later on, she mentions that if you look at paragraph 9, she's talking about the fire and how it burnt the house down. And she kind of like shows some anger or resentment towards Dee because Dee didn't seem to really care. She says, why don't you do a dance around the ashes? I'd wanted to ask her. She had hated the house that much. And that's in paragraph 9. So although there was this desire to want to be something that Dee could be proud of, there was also a resentment that Dee wasn't proud of where they came from and their house, which symbolizes where you come from, right? So let's talk about the commentary. Here, remember, we got to do commentary. Explain how the trait relates to the theme. So Mama's conflict with Dee reveals how Mama feels about the world around her. She wants to be approved by a changing society, right? At the same time, and that's what Dee represented. Remember, Dee showed up and she was sophisticated. She was educated. She had an educated friend with her. Whereas that was a fast forward of the society that Mama grew up in. So at the same time that she wants to be approved by them, she also kind of resents that they turned their back on where they came from. So let's write that down. Mama's conflict with Dee reveals how Mama feels about the world around her. She wants both to be approved by a changing modern society and to hold fast to her own way of life. Later, Mama will have to make a choice. And she made that choice right at the end with the quilts. Between two conflicting ideals. So Mama had to make a choice between the way that society was going and the way she chose to live her life. she chooses to hold fast to her own story. So now we're 2 boxes completely filled. Evolution. So now we're going to describe Mama's traits. How does the character change from the beginning of the story to the end of the story? What other characters or conflicts or actions cause the change? So definitely, she starts out seeking Dee's approval. But by the end, when she realizes that Dee didn't appreciate and was actually ashamed of where she came from, she chooses to give the quilts to Maggie because Maggie was loyal to her heritage. So let's write that down. Mama starts out seeking Dee's approval, wanting Dee to be a part of her family. When she sees through her conflict with Dee that she must choose between her loyalty to Dee and her loyalty to her heritage, she wisely chooses her heritage. Dee was not a very likable character. I think that you would agree. And where we would find evidence of that is at the moment that it clicked with Mama and she actually said, this is the moment that I realized what I should do. And if you look at paragraph 77, that's that moment when I looked at her like that, something hit me in the top of my head and ran down to the soles of my feet. Just like when I'm in church and the Spirit of God touches me and I get happy and shout, I did something I never done before. And that was at the moment that she realizes she needed to take Dee's side. And that's something that she needs to take Maggie's side. That's something that Dee nor Maggie were used to. Up until this point, Mama always took Dee's side. So let's talk about the commentary. Mama chose Maggie because of Mama's love for family and heritage. Dee represented what outsiders thought about Mama and Maggie. And even though she wanted that approval at first, she soon realizes that Dee doesn't appreciate where she came from. And that was why it hit her when it hits her, because by this point, Dee had started taking things from them that they would actually use, and all she was going to do is use them as a showpiece in her apartment. She took the butter churner. Well, Mom and Maggie used that to make butter, but she wanted it just to show off or to kind of show, look where I came from, look how far I've come, but not really a true appreciation of it. Kind of like almost to make fun of where she came from. And once Mama realizes that's what's going on, that's when it hits Mama. This is not the right thing to do. So let's go ahead and write down those thoughts. Her decision to take Maggie's side over Dee's mirrors her strong belief in the value of her family. Remember, we said that um, the theme of the text was about you can leave a legacy through your family. And Maggie, remember, not only did Maggie appreciate her family, she also learned to quilt, which is definitely even more important than the quilts themselves, is that Maggie could have made more quilts. That is the legacy she got from the family. The quilts is one thing, but the ability to make the quilts was even more family oriented. Because when you're at a quilting bee, when you learn to quilt from other women in your family, you're sitting in a circle. And what's happening during that quilting time? You're talking, you're hearing stories about the old days. All of that was Mama's biggest legacy to Maggie. The quilts were just a representation of that. So why give that to Dee? Dee didn't know how to quilt. She never wanted to learn. She made fun of her mom and Maggie not being as smart as she was. All right. Let's move on to actions and motivations. What does the character do and why does the character behave this way? Well, the character takes the quilts that Dee wants and gives them to Maggie. She's never taken Maggie's side before. This is why both of them are so stunned. And Maggie just kind of gives in at first because she's not used to anybody taking her side. So let's go ahead and write that down. Oh. Mama takes the quilts that Dee wants and gives them to Maggie. She has never taken Maggie's. Excuse my typing, y'all. I'm having a moment. I haven't been to school. My typing's going away. I miss y'all. All right. She's always usually putting Dee's needs and wants first. Remember, she makes sure that Dee gets an education, which is something that is extremely valuable. Maggie doesn't get that. All right. Let's go on to our evidence. Okay, so in that same paragraph, in paragraph 77, you'll see that it says that she hugged Maggie to me, then dragged her onto the room, snatched the quilts out of Miss Wangero's hands, and dumped them into Maggie's lap. Maggie just sat there on my bed with her mouth open. That's going to be our evidence because that shows the actions. What did the character do? She gave the quilts to Maggie. Why does the character behave this way? We'll talk about that in the commentary. So she hugged Maggie to me, then dragged. Maggie really doesn't talk a lot because she's not used to things going her way. And that was paragraph 77 as well. Okay, why is this important? Because at the point, which we've already kind of talked about, but we're going to repeat ourselves. At the point that Mama had to make a choice, she chose to keep the legacy, which was the quilts and the ability to quilt in the family. Dee has clearly not seen her parent and her mom and Maggie in a while. Dee has kind of rejected where she came from. And so Mama's actions show that she's loyal to her family. So let's write that down. That's going to be our commentary. Because remember, Maggie and Mama are not rich. Mama only has these stories, this ability to quilt, the quilts themselves. That's the only thing that she can afford to give, to leave as a legacy, because she's poor. And so Maggie's not ashamed of that. Maggie's proud to know how to quilt. Whereas Dee, after going to school, has kind of rejected that family and that old life. So Mama chooses to keep that legacy going, and knowing that it's only going to keep going with Maggie. And then the last thing, it says, describe the character's physical appearance. How do they look? How do they dress? So Mama definitely describes herself as rough and not very flattering. She kind of compares herself to a man a lot. And in paragraph 4, you have evidence of that. I am a large, big, boned woman with rough man working hands. I'm sure that that's what Dee sees when Dee looks at her, but I promise you that's not what Maggie sees. All right, and then, so Mama's appearance, the reason why this is important is you got to remember that Mama grew up working hard, and the reason why she's a large, big boned woman with rough man working hands is because she had to work. So Mama's appearance, I'm gonna write this as I talk to you. Mama's appearance shows a woman who has worked hard and struggled a lot. And the reason why this story is important is because, and I wish that if we had class, you would have, and I may make you do it next week, but I would have you analyze a painting, because the painting's amazing and it goes with this story. And it goes with the story of Henrietta Lacks. Because remember, what did they know about Henrietta Lacks when she, whenever they were trying to work with her sales? They knew that she was a woman who died of cancer. They knew that she was black, and they knew that she was a woman. So this story is also about black women and about how African American women really struggled with identity and legacy. This story takes place not too long after slavery. So this is about their struggle post-slavery to get a grasp and get their place in the world and to form a legacy for their children. And so that's what this story is about, as well as some of the things we're going to read next week. Who struggled with the question of their legacy. All right. So there. The first one is done. Now, you have to do the next two. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me talk about the text. I hope that it helped you understand more about the text. And please leave me a message on Google Classroom if you have any questions. I hope that everyone is safe. Have a good day. I miss y'all, my babies.